There once was a woodcutter, poorer than church mice, living where the forest grows thickest and the pines remember old magic. His youngest daughter, let us call her Astrid, for she was as stubborn as starlight, kept the fire burning with last year's birch bark and prayers. One winter evening, when the snow stacked against the door like white wolves waiting to be let in, something knocked, not the wind, something heavier. The whole hut shivered on its foundations, and the father's axe fell from the wall with a clatter that sounded suspiciously like a warning. The father opened the door. There stood a bear, white as fresh milk, standing on hind legs tall enough to brush the lintel. He wore no collar, carried no pack, but he spoke in a voice like stones grinding together under a glacier. He asked for the daughter. In exchange, he promised gold enough to fill their porridge pot for 100 years. The mother wept. The father hesitated. But Astrid, who had always wanted to see what lay beyond the tree line, packed her only shawl and kissed her father's cheek before he could say no. She climbed onto the bear's back, finding the fur softer than goose down and warmer than any hearth. With a lurch that made her stomach flip like a pancake, they were off. Through the winter woods they traveled, the trees bending away from the bear's path as if showing respect. Astrid buried her fingers in that white coat and watched the moon chase them through the branches. It was terrifying, yes, but also thrilling, the first real adventure of her life, and she was riding it like a ship on a frozen sea. They came to a mountain that looked like a sleeping giant's head, moss for hair and stone for brows. The bear padded to a cliff face and walked straight into it, or rather through it, for the rock rippled like water. Inside, Astrid expected darkness, but found light. The mountain was hollow, filled with a castle built of gold so bright it made her squint. Tapestries woven from starlight hung on walls of polished amber, and everywhere was silent, save for the click of her boots on marble floors that seemed to sing under her feet. Each night the bear vanished after supper, leaving Astrid alone in a bed big enough for 3 kings. But she was not alone, not really. Someone lay beside her in the dark, a shape, a warmth, a presence that smelled of pine and distant thunder. She never saw him, for the room was black as a closed eyelid, but she felt the weight of another's dreams pressing against her shoulder. It was strange, yes, but in this place of impossible gold, strangeness felt like home. She slept and dreamed of white fur and whispered secrets. The days passed like honey, slow and golden. But Astrid's mother had given her a candle before she left, whispering that she must see who shared her bed. Curiosity, that old itch, grew worse with every sunset. On the third night, Astrid lit the wick. The flame leaped up hungry, and she saw him. Not a bear, but a boy. No, a prince with hair black as the raven's wing and skin pale as the inside of an almond. He slept with his hand curled near his face, peaceful as a prayer. And Astrid's heart, that traitor, turned over in her chest. 3 drops of tallow fell, plip, 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 onto his breast. His eyes snapped open. They were gray as winter rain and full of sorrow. You could not wait, he said, and his voice was no longer bear grumble but human melancholy. Now I must go to the castle east of the sun and west of the moon, there to marry the troll princess with a nose 3 ells long. For I am cursed, and only your patience could have broken it. He dressed in clothes that appeared from smoke, and Astrid wept onto the bedsheets, for she had failed him with her small flame. The ground shook. Trolls were coming, big as houses, ugly as nightmares, with noses that sniffed out broken promises. They seized the prince, who was now turning back into the white bear before Astrid's horrified eyes. The transformation was half complete, a monstrous thing between man and beast, as they dragged him toward the east. Astrid ran after them, but the mountain door slammed shut, and she was alone in the golden castle that had suddenly turned to brass and emptiness. The silence was absolute. The adventure, it seemed, had only just begun. She did not hesitate long. Astrid took her shawl, her courage, and the 1 golden apple she had found rolling under the bed. She walked out of the mountain into the wide world, and she did not look back. Her boots made prints in the snow that filled with starlight. She walked until she found the edge of the forest, where an old woman sat beneath an apple tree that bore fruit in winter. The woman's eyes were milky, but she saw Astrid clear enough. "You seek the winds," she said. "The north wind is blowing home to supper. Catch him if you can." The north wind came howling down the valley like a pack of ghost wolves, tearing up trees and scattering birds. Astrid stood in his path, her shawl whipping around her like a flag. "Take me to the castle east of the sun and west of the moon," she shouted above the gale. The north wind stopped, surprised. No one had ever asked politely before. He was a gruff giant with a beard of icicles and breath that froze pine cones solid. He looked at her, small and stubborn as a stone in a stream, and he laughed. "Climb on, little mortal. Hold tight, I go fast." They flew higher than eagles over mountains capped with eternal frost and valleys where the sun never reached. The cold bit Astrid's cheeks, but the north wind's breath smelled of peppermint and pine resin, which helped. They arrived at a house made entirely of storm clouds, gray and purple and constantly rumbling. Inside, the north wind's wife, a woman with hair like cirrus clouds, served them soup that steamed with lightning. "My husband cannot take you all the way," she said gently. "But his brother, the west wind, knows the way across the sea." The west wind was wilder than his brother, all salt spray and gull cries. He wore a coat made of ocean foam and moved like a riptide. Astrid climbed onto his back, slippery as a fish, but she held on, and they plunged off the cloud house into the sea itself. Not over it, mind you, but through it, cutting through waves like a knife through silk. Fish scattered like silver coins. Whales sang dirges that vibrated in her ribs. They arrived at the west wind's house, a palace of driftwood and pearls where the tide came in to visit every evening. "My brother the south wind knows the desert beyond the sea," said the west wind, combing his hair with a whalebone. "He is hot-tempered, but he respects courage." The south wind met them at the edge of the world where the ocean turns to sand. He was a lean man with skin like burnished copper and eyes that glowed like coals. He smelled of cinnamon and myrrh. When Astrid climbed on his back, it was like riding a sunbeam, scorching, blinding, exhilarating. They crossed a desert of glass where the sand had melted into mirrors and the sky reflected below until she could not tell up from down. The south wind's house was built of amber and bone, surrounded by flowers that never died but only changed colors with the hours. His wife was a lizard woman with kind eyes who gave Astrid water that tasted of forgotten summers. "You're nearly there," said the south wind, fanning himself with a palm frond. "But only the east wind knows the way to the place where the sun rests its head. He is the oldest and wisest, but he is also proud." Astrid thanked them and walked toward the dawn where the sky was already turning pink with anticipation. The east wind was not what she expected. He was young, with hair the color of sunrise and robes woven from the first light of morning. He smelled of rain on dry earth and new beginnings. "I know where you wish to go," he said before she could ask.
"East of the sun, west of the moon."
"I was born there, in the first light. I will take you, but you must promise not to look down. The space between worlds is not meant for mortal eyes." Astrid promised. She climbed onto his back, and he smelled like hope. They traveled through the place where dawn is born, where the sun polishes its face before rising, and the moon washes her silver hair before setting. It was a land of impossible geometry, mountains hanging upside down, rivers flowing straight up into the sky, and flowers made of clockwork that chimed the hours. Finally, the east wind set her down on a cliff of rose quartz. Below them lay the castle east of the sun and west of the moon, built of black ice and burning stone, where the troll princess waited with her nose 3 ells long, stirring wedding porridge. Astrid descended the cliff, using roots that grew sideways out of the rock, defying gravity. She approached the castle gates, which were guarded by trolls with noses so long they used them as clubs. But Astrid was clever. She rolled the golden apple into the courtyard, and it bounced and gleamed in the weird light. The troll princess herself came out to investigate, a monstrous creature with skin like old cheese and that infamous nose which she carried in a sling around her neck. She picked up the apple, delighted, and Astrid stepped from the shadows. "I wish to see the prince," she said. "You may see him," said the troll princess, her voice like gravel in a blender, "but he will not know you. He drank the draught of forgetting, and in his mind I'm his only love." She laughed, showing teeth like broken tombstones. Astrid was led to a chamber where the prince sat, dressed in troll finery, his eyes blank as clouded glass. He looked at Astrid as if she were a stranger. Do I know you? He asked. Astrid's heart cracked, but she did not cry. Not yet, she said, but you will. The troll princess set Astrid an impossible task. Wash this shirt, she commanded, throwing a garment at Astrid's feet. It was the prince's nightshirt, stained with 3 drops of tallow. Wash it clean by morning, or I will feed you to my hounds. The shirt was filthy stiff with old wax and worse things. Astrid scrubbed until her fingers bled, but the spots remained dark as sin. She sat in the scullery, surrounded by black ice and despair, and she wept. Her tears fell on the shirt, and something miraculous happened. The wax began to soften. The troll princess returned at dawn, expecting to gloat. But Astrid held up the shirt, spotless as new snow, whiter than the bear's fur had been. The princess stared, her long nose quivering with rage. "Impossible," she shrieked. "You must have had help." She tore the shirt from Astrid's hands and inspected it. But there was no trickery, only cleanliness, pure and simple. "He still does not know you," the princess hissed. "One task means nothing." But in the prince's eyes, a flicker of recognition had begun like a candle flame far down a dark corridor. Astrid would not give up. She produced the golden carding comb, a gift from the old woman, and offered it to the princess. "Let me see him again," she bargained. The princess, greedy for gold, agreed. Again, Astrid stood before the prince, and again he did not know her. But she told him stories of their nights in the golden castle, of the 3 drops of tallow, of the white bear's back. She sang the song the mountain had hummed under her boots. A tear fell from the prince's eye, but the forgetting spell held firm. The princess dragged Astrid away, laughing. The final gift was the golden spinning wheel, which could spin sunlight into thread. The princess could not resist. "One last chance," she sneered. "But if he does not know you by sunset, I will marry him anyway, and you will be my serving maid forever, scrubbing floors with your tongue." The threat was vile, but Astrid nodded. She entered the prince's chamber a 3rd time. The sun was low, painting the black ice walls with blood-red light. Astrid took his hands. She placed them over her heart. "Feel this," she said. "This is yours. It has always been yours." The prince looked at her, really looked. The forgetting spell cracked like thin ice under a boot. "Astrid," he whispered. "Is it you?" She nodded, unable to speak. He touched her face, wonder replacing confusion. "I remember," he said, "the candle, the drops, the bear." The troll princess burst in, saw them embracing, and screamed a curse that shattered windows. But the prince, now remembering he was a prince, not a beast, drew himself up tall. "I will not marry you," he declared. "My heart belongs to the girl who rode the 4 winds to find me." The troll princess summoned her mother, the troll queen, a mountain of a woman with a nose long enough to stir porridge in the next county, but Astrid was quick. She grabbed the prince's hand and ran. They dashed through corridors of black ice, the trolls howling behind them. The east wind appeared at the gates, grinning. "Need a lift?" he asked. They climbed on his back, both of them this time, and he launched them into the sky just as the troll queen's fingers snapped shut on empty air. The chase was on. The troll queen whistled up a storm of her own making, thunderheads black as her heart, lightning that struck like spears. But the 4 winds were brothers, and they do not abandon their friends. The north wind threw ice in the troll's eyes. The west wind drenched them with waves. The south wind burned their feet with sand. And the east wind, dear brave east, carried Astrid and the prince through the dawn faster than thought, until the troll castle was just a bad dream shrinking behind them. They stopped at each wind's house to rest and give thanks. At the house of clouds, the north wind's wife wove them cloaks of storm-gray wool. At the palace of driftwood, the west wind gave them shoes that could walk on water. At the amber house, the south wind's wife gave them bread that never went stale. And at the house of dawn, the east wind gave them his blessing, which was worth more than gold. Then he set them down at the edge of the woodcutter's forest, where the snow was just ordinary snow again. The walk home was different from the flight there. They walked slowly, hand in hand, through forests that no longer seemed dark but merely cozy. The prince was himself again, no longer bear, no longer prisoner. He told Astrid of his curse, how he had been a prince in a kingdom far away, enchanted by the trolls for refusing to marry their princess. How only a maiden willing to ride the winds for him could break the spell completely. You did more than break a curse, he said. You gave me the world. When they reached the hut, the woodcutter and his wife did not recognize the prince at first, but they knew their daughter. The mother wept. The father blustered and hid his own tears in his beard. But when Astrid explained how this was the bear, the white bear now freed, they welcomed him with open arms. The gold the bear had promised had long since run out, but it did not matter. Astrid had brought home something better than gold. She had brought home a story, and a love, and a future. They were married in the spring, when the bear, if he had still been one, would have come out of his den. The wedding was held in the forest clearing where Astrid had first climbed on the wind's back. The four winds sent gifts: a rain that made flowers bloom instantly, a breeze that carried the scent of every good thing, a warmth that made old bones feel young, and a dawn that lasted an hour longer than usual. Astrid wore a dress woven from the east wind's morning light, and the prince wore the storm-gray cloak. And so they lived, not in a castle of gold or a hut of wood, but in a house they built together where the forest meets the wind. Astrid kept the apple tree from the old woman, and it bore fruit every winter, golden and sweet. The prince kept his bear strength and could carry her over streams when the stepping stones were too far apart. They had children who could speak to the winds and who never ever lit candles when they were told not to. But that is another story for another night when the fire is low and the wind is knocking at the door.